We all remember in June when the Warriors lost the NBA Finals in historic fashion. The Cavaliers took them down in Game 7 after Golden State was up 3-1. And now that Steph Curry is 3 months removed from that loss, he says he's still reflecting on it, saying this to USA Today Sports. I still haven't gotten over Game 7. That's something that will stay with me pretty much forever, for good and bad reasons. Obviously, you hated the feeling, but it's also a motivator to come back even stronger and try not to have that feeling again. I'm at that point now where I can try to fuel any kind of terrible nightmares or thoughts about Game 7 into motivation for how I'm going to prepare myself for this year. So terrible nightmares and thoughts now fuel. Stephen A., your reaction?
Well, you have reasons to be scared. Steph Curry is a superstar in this league because he's the greatest shooter we've ever seen. The guy averaged 30 last year, 50% shooting from the field, 45% shooting from three-point range. Most of his shots are from the perimeter, and he still hit 50% of his shots and averaged 30 and has won the league MVP for the second time in as many years, and nobody was disputing the fact that he's clearly the league MVP. He is a superstar because he makes shots from everywhere. But that's not the Steph Curry we saw in Game 7. He has some making up to do, which is why you take those quotes very seriously. It's not that they lost. It's that you can make a legitimate argument that they lost because of him. 17 points in Game 7. 6 of 19 shooting from the field, that's 31%. 4 of 14 shooting from three-point range, that's 28%. Numbers far below what he registered throughout the regular season. When you combine that with some key pivotal turnovers, sort of laissez-faire attitude towards protecting the ball, Steph Curry was not 100%. And anybody who thinks he was 100% and just struggled, they don't know basketball. They don't know this guy playing basketball, because this brother was not 100% at all. You could see it. But it still doesn't excuse some of the turnovers, some of the recklessness with the basketball at key pivotal moments, derailing momentum. And here's the biggest thing it doesn't derail. We've been talking so much about what Steph Curry didn't do. We have not spoken enough about what a dude by the name of Kyrie Irving did to Steph Curry. I mean, he was giving it to him. Every chance Kyrie Irving got, when he saw Steph Curry in front of him defending him, you could literally see him drooling at the mouth, just salivate for the opportunity to dance on this brother and give it to him. And that last jump shot from the right wing beyond the three-point line that Kyrie Irving hit to seal the deal in the first championship in over 50 years for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Kyrie Irving averaged 27 for the finals. It's not a moment. I mean, he was busting their butt. And that includes Klay Thompson to a lesser degree, but primarily Steph Curry. So when Steph Curry makes these kind of quotes, I'm like, uh-oh, because here he comes. He's going to need to come, even though he was not 100%, and he was injured, and it wasn't a god-awful performance. It wasn't what we expected from Steph Curry. He has some making up to do, and that means that everyone should be very, very scared, because with the acquisition of Kevin Durant, one thing is very clear. He may miss some shots in terms of getting opportunities because Kevin Durant's going to take some of those shots away from him. The flip side is the shots that Steph Curry actually does get, they're going to be open ones. And he's not wanting to miss contested ones. So Lord help us all what he's going to do if he's open, which is why I'm ticked off for Kevin Durant going there, because it's just, I mean, it's a walk in the park as far as I'm concerned, which irritates me.
When the possibility of me doing this show came up, this was one of the things I really focused on. I'm going to get to talk to Stephen A. Smith about basketball during the NBA season every day and go at him about basketball, just like I know you enjoy talking to me and going at me about boxing.
Yeah, but people usually don't enjoy coming at me about basketball. They usually lose very, very glaringly. But go ahead.
Nevertheless,
yes,
he wasn't 100% Steph Curry. And that's a shame, because 2 years ago when he won the MVP, I thought, but he's not the best player in the world. You could see LeBron's still better than him. He won the regular season MVP, and he was something less than his best self in the finals that year, 2 years ago, when they won the whole thing. LeBron was the best player in the finals. He didn't have any help. Kyrie and obviously Kevin Love both hurt. But the following season, Stephen A., for several months, I thought Steph Curry's the best player in the world. He was not only the MVP the previous season, he was the most improved player off his MVP season. This is something new. He's hitting shots from so far away, everyone has extra space. And he was inspiring kids because they looked at him, they go, no one his size was ever considered the best player in the game, ever. But he was. Even when Nash was winning MVPs, even when Iverson, they were never considered the best player in the game during Kobe and Shaq and all. But Steph, maybe he is the best player in the game. And kids could look at him and go, he's not the tallest, he's not the fastest, he doesn't jump the highest in a sport that rewards all that. But through practice, whether true or not, he made people feel inspiration. If I practice my handles, if I practice my shot, I could be the best one day. So I really love Steph Curry. I love watching him play. But Stephen A. Smith, in the finals, he was not only not 100% physically, which was clearly true. Even when he switched on to bigs, he couldn't get separation. He was messed up physically. But he had his heart taken against LeBron James. LeBron James took his heart. It gives me no pleasure to say that. Here's the proof in the pudding.
I disagree with that.
It's mentally not being 100% that was the problem, and I think that's what's eating at him right now. Here's the proof in the pudding. He wasn't good physically against the Thunder either. He was out-athleted by Westbrook and Durant. But with the chips on the line, in Game 7, in the fourth quarter, I was there. We saw each other there. Steph Curry was the best player on the floor, so his team won the Western Conference Finals. It's the history of the NBA. In a close Game 7, who has the best player on the floor? That team's going to win. That was the Warriors. That was Steph Curry because Durant and Westbrook never got in his head. And by the way, fourth quarter of Game 7 against the Thunder, 5 of 6 shooting, 2 of 3 on threes, and his team won. But the fourth quarter of Game 7 against the Cavs, after LeBron not only dominated him physically, but let him know it, dunked on him, got in his face, and
Game
Steph,
6.
Game 6, and
Right.
Steph kind of slinked off as LeBron is domineering over him. That's Steph
He didn't
Curry.
slink off. He looked at him like, what?
No, he looked at him like, what? Like, oh, I don't want that.
No, please.
1 for 6 shooting in the fourth quarter of Game 7 at home, plus a kind of careless turnover behind the back. That's someone who got mentally dominated. It's okay, it's part of the learning curve. That could happen. Muhammad Ali did it to George Foreman. Never happened to Foreman again after that. In his second career, Foreman learned from that. Steph can learn from it. But what happened was the best player in the world imposed himself physically, let Steph know about it, and changed him mentally.
You're wrong. You're wrong. Steph Curry is the smaller player. Steph Curry's a shooter. His shot wasn't falling, and Kyrie was giving it to him. You keep talking about LeBron. LeBron did not snatch Steph Curry's heart. I love the way that LeBron James got in his face, but make no mistake about it. When you are a smaller dude, but you are a marksman, you're not scared of anybody because you don't believe your success or failure is about anybody else. You believe it's about making shots.
What happened to his shot? Why wasn't it?
I'm saying he was hurt.
And what about the careless behind the back pass?
I brought all of those points up, but that doesn't mean you choked. That means you messed up.
What happened?
That's a difference.
No. Definition of choking is messing up under pressure.
No. The definition of choking is doing things that you normally do and then suddenly not being able to do it because of pressurized moments. Whereas throughout this series, periodically, Steph Curry was like that. He wasn't himself all series long. Now, if it
that
was
the same thing against the Thunder,
if Steph Curry was playing ball lights out games 1 through 6, and then all of a sudden disappears in Game 7, you have a point. But there were a myriad of games during the finals where Steph Curry didn't show up, to the point where we all knew that Draymond Green was going to get MVP if they had won the game. It wasn't going to be Steph Curry because he wasn't there.
That's my point. Physically, he was compromised. He couldn't do the things he normally does.
That's not choking.
But wait, with the money on the line against the Thunder, he was better than Durant. He was better than Westbrook. Why wasn't he able to do anything? Including pass the ball.
Because of attrition, because he wasn't 100%.
Because LeBron got in his head.
No, I don't think so.
That's why it's eating at him right now.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Not when it comes to a marksman.
Regardless
Shooters
of what
don't worry
he's
about
going to
that.
have a chip on his shoulder this year, and he's going to learn a lot from it, and that is very scary, obviously.
Love you, Steph, but
if something like that were to happen, you've proved my point. And it'll be loud and clear for everyone why it happened, and that would move this movement forward at a greater speed than what it is even now. I mean, granted, I don't want that to happen
very often.
but that's the realization of what could happen. I mean, and I knew there were other things that came along with this when I first stood up and spoke about it. So that's not something I haven't thought about.
Stephen A. Kaepernick is having his life threatened. What's your reaction to what he just said?
My reaction to what he just said is a call for America to really, really heed what he's saying. Essentially, if you parse his words, Colin Kaepernick just said he's willing to die for the cause that he's taken up. That's what he said. He said doesn't want it to happen. He's not wishing for it to happen, but if it happens, it will just shine a more illuminated light on the cause that he's willing to address, which is racial injustices in this country. Obviously, there's a shooting that took place. It's in the news. It took place in Charlotte, North Carolina. Another black man was gunned down by a police officer. It's important. They were rioting, or, you know, just throwing stuff at police cars. Tear gas was called upon to be used, or whatever. What we have to remember is that that police officer who shot the black man also happens to be a black police officer. It's a police officer that's been there for 2 years. He's on the job. And so when we look at it from that perspective, I've gotten to a point where I was speaking to somebody that I love dearly last night that was talking to me about how frustrated she is because she has means, and she knows so many of us in our community that have means, Max. And we're at a loss as to what to do. I've encouraged people to listen to my man Joe Madison in the morning on Sirius XM Review, Karen Hunt in the afternoon on the same channel. Voices like myself, my man Warren Ballantyne, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, Mark Lamont Hill with his new book out, et cetera, et cetera. There are Mark Thompson as well. There's a plethora of us from the African-American community that have to come together and be willing to do what we can. But we have to recognize the fact that this is serious, serious stuff that's going on. And you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if things don't get addressed and we don't start talking about solutions, then this is only going to get worse. I got more to say, but go ahead, Max. I just think that's the point that I want to make first and foremost.
There's a history in this country of black athletes being threatened with anonymous death threats. Muhammad Ali, when he refused induction, when he converted to Islam and then refused induction into the armed services. Mm-hmm. Hank Aaron, when he was going to break Babe Ruth's home run record. And there are others, and now Colin Kaepernick, for protesting peacefully and respectfully the national anthem, which has no other way to say it, racist verse that we no longer sing. Yeah. This country has a history of threatening and worse black men anonymously. People with hoods and masks did it anonymously because they're cowards. And the person who sent an anonymous death threat to Colin Kaepernick is a coward. That's a terroristic threat.
Yep.
The point is to chill free speech, is to stop him from expressing his point of view. They should be, I hope law enforcement investigates it seriously. I hope they catch the person. I hope they prosecute them to the full extent of the law. And I hope that person goes to prison, because that's where they belong. It's outrageous. And let me just speak to, I understand that the person who did this is probably inarticulate and very angry and undereducated. And so they kind of put onto Kaepernick their anger. He becomes a symbol for their anger. I understand that you're very angry. That's not okay to behave the way that you're behaving. And the fact that you are focused so much on Kaepernick's protest that you want that to stop, so you send a death threat. Here's another way to get the protest to stop. Motivate yourself politically to address the root causes of the protest in the first place. Because if the systemic racism that persists, though it's lessening over time by any objective measure, but still persists as a result of hundreds of years of oppression, if that gets better, you will see fewer protests. If the protest is making you that angry.
Couple of things I wanted to touch on here. One of the solutions, and doing my radio show every day on Sirius XM, one of the things that I love about the show is that I got a lot of white callers from different parts of the country, obviously. Mississippi, North Dakota, you know, Idaho, and, you know, list goes on. It's not just folks calling me from Chicago, New York, LA, et cetera, et cetera. And for the most part, decent, God-fearing people that just have a different perspective and a different point of view. Primarily, their frustration evolves around the fact that the actions of the few ignorant amongst them taints a lot of them in their eyes, in the eyes of black folks. And as a result, it makes them reluctant to come forward. One of the things that I have a fantasy about working here at ESPN is that we would have that town hall. And guess what my desire for that town hall to be? I'd like to host a town hall where I'm the only black person in attendance. And I'm sitting there with a whole bunch of white folks or whomever, angry, mild-mannered, whatever the case may be, and I can literally ask them questions that others, whether it be black or whomever, are dying to know. And they're brave enough and free enough to know that we'll listen and give them an opportunity to vent their frustration with what's going on in this world. I think that's a step in the right direction. A couple of other things I wanted to point out. Economics is everything. When people have nothing to lose and they're feeling victimized, chaos is coming. It's inevitable. You're talking about the need for trade schools education. We see our president, you know, pardoning a lot of folks, or, you know, allowing nonviolent felons to come out of jail. Well, that's not good enough. What you might need to do is make sure that their record is completely cleared so they can actually go out there and get a job. If they're nonviolent offenders, I mean, either keep them in jail or let them out and clear their record so they can go out there and get a job. Because if you let them out, but they still have a record and people are hesitant to hire them,
they can't support themselves.
Exactly, they can't support themselves. Then what do you think they're going to do? They're going to revert to crime. And I also think it's important to assist members from disenfranchised communities when it comes to ownership, because this one thing it's proven. When you own something, you value it more. When you value something more, you have something to lose, and therefore you act accordingly. I'm telling you right now, I used to think about racism all the time when I was younger. You know what I think about now? Classism. And you know when I recognize that I'm a product of classism in the worst way? Because when I bought a home and I had neighbors, you know, sitting there, one taking care of their house, I viewed it as them bringing down the neighborhood, and all of a sudden I started acting like the people that I used to complain about. Oh, I got a vested interest, and all of a sudden, you know, somebody roll up to me, Stephen, hey, man, love you, man, how you doing? And I'm like, could you cut your grass? Could you take care of it? Because, oh, hell yeah, I did it because it matters to me.
You talked about what makes white people angry, essentially.
Sure.
You said you want to be the only black guy in the room.
And for that town hall.
I'll say this.
I love that idea.
Yes.
The status quo, which is unfair, I mean, we know that there's inequality. No one denies that there's inequality, and objectively it is true there is inequality. That needs to be addressed. Steps that address it, in other words, bring people that have been unequal up, in a relative sense, bring people who have enjoyed the status quo down. Now, you may say in an absolute sense, everyone's lot in life gets better. For example, there's air conditioning now. There didn't used to be. There's refrigeration. There used to be. But that's not the way people experience the world. People experience the world not in an absolute sense, in a relative sense. We're competitive. People are by nature competitive. They're comparing it to what the people around them have. And so even if in an absolute sense, life is getting better for people in areas, those who enjoy the status quo and see others come up, see their neighbors who didn't do so well come up in the world, experience that often as a relative decline in their own fortunes. And I think that's where a lot of the anger that you see around a black athlete, for example, who in the old days would have been called uppity enough to sit down during the national anthem comes from. How dare he? How dare he challenge the status quo that has been good to me? As he comes up in the world, I feel that as a relative decline in my world. And I think that's where a lot of this anger that you talk about comes from.
Last point I like to make is this. Your points, highly respected, really appreciate them. You heard what I had to say. Yeah. Let's bring this home. Let me emphasize this. Nothing better happened to Colin Kaepernick. People want peace. You don't do that. The way this world is going right now, nothing better not happen to Colin Kaepernick. I'm just going to leave it at that. there would be a problem. There would be a problem. We don't want that.
No.
We don't want that.
We will leave it there.